Bullies steal the MAGA hat. Terrible mistake. He's a brutal fighter. Marcus Vega walked through the doors of Roosevelt High School with his head down, the red cap sitting firmly on his dark hair. At 17, he was average height, but lean with calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. His quiet demeanor and preference for solitude made him nearly invisible to most students. He liked it that way. The hallways buzzed with the typical morning chaos of teenagers rushing to lockers and first-period classes. Marcus navigated through the crowd carefully, avoiding eye contact. His red MAGA hat drew occasional stares and whispered comments, but he wore it proudly despite the hostile environment at Roosevelt High, a school where such political expression was far from popular. Just get through another day, Marcus thought, adjusting his backpack strap. Keep your head down, stay out of trouble. That philosophy had served him well for the past 2 years at Roosevelt. As the son of a single mother who worked double shifts at the local diner, Marcus understood the value of avoiding unnecessary conflict. What his classmates didn't know was that those calloused hands came from years of training at his uncle's martial arts dojo, where he had earned his black belt in mixed martial arts at 15. His uncle Miguel had been clear about the responsibility that came with his skills. Your fists are weapons now, mijo. You use them only when there's no other choice. You protect yourself and others, but you never become the aggressor. Marcus had taken those words to heart, even when provoked. The first signs of trouble came during second period when he noticed Tyler Bronson and his crew whispering and pointing in his direction. Tyler was the stereotypical alpha of Roosevelt High, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders from his position on the football team, and a sneer that suggested he owned the place. His lieutenants, Jake Morrison and Derek Hayes, flanked him like loyal attack dogs. Tyler's eyes locked onto Marcus's hat with undisguised disgust. "Look what we got here, boys," he said loud enough for half the class to hear. "Little Patriot thinks he's making a statement." Marcus pretended not to hear, focusing intently on his textbook. His jaw clenched slightly, but he maintained his composure. Ignore them. They'll get bored and move on. But Tyler wasn't the type to get bored easily. During lunch, Marcus found his usual spot in the corner of the cafeteria, away from the main social clusters. He pulled out his sandwich and began eating in peace, occasionally glancing up to observe the social dynamics around him. Roosevelt High was a microcosm of the outside world, different groups clustering together, invisible boundaries marking territory. Tyler's laughter cut through the ambient noise like a knife. Marcus looked up to see the football player approaching, with his usual entourage, their eyes fixed on him with predatory intent. "Hey, Red Hat," Tyler called out, loud enough to turn heads throughout the cafeteria. "You lost or something? The Trump rally is downtown, not here." Marcus continued eating, his movements deliberate and calm. Inside, however, his uncle's training kicked in automatically. He assessed the situation. 3 aggressors, multiple exit routes, approximately 40 witnesses, and a good 15 feet of space between him and the nearest wall. "Stay calm. Don't escalate." "I'm talking to you, freak," Tyler said, now standing directly in front of Marcus's table. The cafeteria had grown noticeably quieter, students sensing impending drama. Marcus finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting Tyler's blue ones without flinching. "I heard you. I'm just trying to eat my lunch." "Well, maybe you should eat it somewhere else," Derek chimed in, emboldened by Tyler's presence. "Your kind isn't really welcome here." The words stung, but Marcus had heard worse. He began packing up his lunch slowly, refusing to be rushed despite the growing tension. "That's right, run away," Jake added with a cruel laugh. "Just like you people always do when things get tough." Marcus stood up, his movements controlled and measured. He was outnumbered and surrounded by hostile faces, but his uncle's training had prepared him for moments like this. The key was de-escalation, not confrontation. "There's no problem here," Marcus said quietly, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. "I'll finish eating somewhere else." Tyler stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "I don't think you understand, Red Hat. The problem isn't where you eat. The problem is what you're wearing." For a moment, Marcus considered removing the hat to avoid conflict. It would be the easy way out, the path of least resistance. But something in Tyler's expectant smirk stopped him. This wasn't really about the hat. It was about power, about Tyler asserting dominance over someone he perceived as weak. "It's just a hat," Marcus said simply. "Not just any hat," Tyler replied, his voice growing more aggressive. "That hat represents everything wrong with this country, and I'm not going to sit here and watch you parade it around like some kind of hero." The cafeteria was now completely silent, all eyes focused on the confrontation. Marcus could see Mrs. Peterson, the the lunch monitor beginning to move in their direction, but she was still too far away to intervene effectively. Marcus took a step back, creating space. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, Tyler. I just want to finish my lunch and get to class." "Too late for that," Tyler said with a malicious grin. Before Marcus could react, Tyler's hand shot out and snatched the red cap from his head. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and nervous laughter. Marcus's dark hair fell across his forehead as he stared at Tyler, who was now holding the hat like a trophy. "There we go," Tyler announced to the room. "Much better. You almost look normal now." Marcus felt a flash of anger burn in his chest, but he forced it down. This is exactly what he wants. Don't give him the satisfaction. "Give me back my hat, Tyler." "Or what?" Tyler challenged, dangling the cap just out of reach. "You gonna cry about it? Gonna run to mommy?" Jake and Derek laughed on cue, and several other students joined in. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes on him, waiting to see how he would respond. Some faces showed sympathy, others anticipation, but most just displayed the morbid curiosity that came with witnessing someone else's humiliation. "Please," Marcus said, hating how the word sounded coming out of his mouth. "Just give it back." Tyler's grin widened. "Begging now? That's more like it." He held the hat higher, just out of Marcus's reach. "Jump for it, little man. Show everyone how badly you want your precious hat back." The humiliation was designed to be public and complete. Marcus could feel his face burning with embarrassment, but he remained still. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to show Tyler exactly what happened when you pushed too far, but his uncle's voice echoed in his mind. "Violence is never the first option, mijo. Always look for another way." "Tyler, that's enough." The voice came from an unexpected source. Sarah Chen, a quiet girl from Marcus's English class. She had risen from her table and was walking toward the confrontation with determined steps. Tyler turned his attention to her with obvious irritation. "This doesn't concern you, Chen. Sit back down." "Actually, it does," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the obvious nervousness in her posture. "You're making everyone uncomfortable. Just give him back his hat and move on." For a moment, Marcus thought Tyler might back down. The football player's confident expression faltered slightly as he realized not everyone was enjoying the show. But then Derek stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Mind your own business, Asian girl. This is between us and Red Hat here." Sarah's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, Tyler made his decision. With deliberate slowness, he dropped the hat on the floor and stepped on it, grinding his heel into the fabric. "Oops," he said with mock innocence. "Clumsy me." The cafeteria erupted in scattered laughter and gasps. Marcus stared down at his hat, now dirty and partially torn from Tyler's boot. Something cold and final settled in his chest. "That's enough." Marcus bent down and carefully picked up the damaged hat, brushing off the dirt and debris. When he stood back up, Tyler was still grinning, expecting either tears or angry words. Instead, Marcus simply looked at him with those dark, calm eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," Marcus said quietly. There was something in his tone that made Tyler's grin falter slightly. "What did you say?" "I said you shouldn't have done that." Marcus's voice was still quiet, but it carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "But I guess we'll both find out what happens next." Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced. "Are you threatening me, Red Hat? Because if you are—" "I'm not threatening anyone," Marcus interrupted, his voice remaining calm and measured. "I'm just saying that actions have consequences, for all of us." He turned and walked away, leaving Tyler standing in the middle of the cafeteria with a confused expression. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed that the confrontation had ended without violence. But Marcus knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. News of the cafeteria incident had spread throughout Roosevelt High with the speed that only high school gossip could achieve. Marcus found himself the subject of intense scrutiny, some students offering sympathetic looks while others seemed to be waiting for his next move. Tyler and his crew, meanwhile, were riding high on their perceived victory. They made sure to cross Marcus's path several times throughout the day, each encounter designed to reinforce their dominance. "How's the hat, Red Boy?" Jake called out during the passing period between classes. "Still crying about it?" Derek added with a cruel laugh. Marcus ignored them, but he could feel their eyes on him constantly. They were testing him, pushing to see how far they could go before he broke. The answer came 3 days later. Marcus had hoped the incident would blow over, that Tyler and his friends would find new targets and leave him alone. Instead, the opposite happened. Emboldened by his perceived weakness, Tyler began a systematic campaign of harassment that went far beyond the original conflict. It started small, shoulder checks in the hallway, loud comments about losers in red hats, deliberate attempts to bump into him and spill his books. But it escalated quickly. On Thursday, Marcus arrived at his locker to find it covered in graffiti. Someone had spray-painted "Traitor" across the metal door in bright red letters. The custodial staff cleaned it off within an hour, but not before half the school had seen it. On Friday, he found his bike tires slashed in the parking lot after school. By Monday, the harassment had become constant and creative. Tyler's crew had expanded to include several other students who seemed to view tormenting Marcus as entertainment. They followed him between classes, made loud comments during lunch, and even convinced some underclassmen to join in the fun. Marcus endured it all with the same quiet dignity he had always maintained. But inside, something was building. The careful control his uncle had taught him was beginning to crack under the constant pressure. The breaking point came on Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was walking to his last class of the day when he heard shouting from the direction of the library. Recognizing one of the voices, he quickened his pace and rounded the corner to see Tyler, Jake, and Derek surrounding a small freshman named David Restrepo. David was barely 14, skinny and nervous, with thick glasses that made him an easy target. He was also wearing a small American flag pin on his backpack, apparently enough to earn Tyler's attention. "Look what we got here," Tyler was saying, his voice carrying the same cruel tone Marcus had heard in the cafeteria. "Another little patriot. What is it with you people and your flags and hats?" David was pressed against the wall, his eyes wide with fear. His backpack had been torn open, books and papers scattered across the hallway floor. I don't want any trouble," David stammered, trying to gather his things. "Too bad," Derek said, kicking David's textbook further down the hall. "Trouble found you." Marcus stopped walking. Every instinct told him to keep moving, to avoid getting involved in something that wasn't his fight. He had his own problems with Tyler's crew, and intervening would only make things worse for himself. But as he watched David cowering against the wall, something inside him snapped. This isn't about the hat. It never was. This is about them, thinking they can hurt anyone they want without consequences. Marcus set down his backpack and walked toward the confrontation with purposeful steps. "Leave him alone, Tyler." The football player turned around with surprise and then delight. Well, look who decided to grow a backbone, come to defend your little friend." "I'm not his friend," Marcus replied calmly. "I don't even know him. But I know you, and I know what you're doing, and it stops now." Tyler laughed, but there was something different in Marcus's posture that made him hesitate. The quiet boy who had endured weeks of harassment without fighting back was standing differently now. Straighter, more balanced, more dangerous. "Oh, it stops now," Tyler mocked, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "And what exactly are you going to do about it, Red Hat?" Marcus took another step forward, and Tyler instinctively stepped back. The hallway had grown quiet, students sensing that something significant was about to happen. "I'm going to give you one chance to walk away," Marcus said, his voice still calm but carrying an undertone of steel. "All of you, walk away now, and we can pretend this never happened." Jake laughed nervously. "Dude, there's 3 of us and 1 of him. What's he gonna do?" But Derek wasn't laughing. Something in Marcus's eyes had triggered an instinctive warning in the back of his mind. "Maybe we should just—" "Shut up, Derek," Tyler snapped, his pride overriding his caution. "I'm not backing down from this loser." He took a step toward Marcus, raising his fist in a threatening gesture. It was exactly the opening Marcus had been waiting for. Years of training exploded into action in less than 3 seconds. Marcus's right hand shot out in a perfect jab that caught Tyler squarely in the solar plexus, driving all the air from his lungs and dropping him to his knees. Before Jake could react, Marcus pivoted and delivered a precise kick to his legs that swept him off his feet and sent him crashing into the lockers. Derek, seeing his friends on the ground, charged forward with a wild swing that Marcus easily avoided. A simple hip toss sent Derek flying over Marcus's shoulder to land hard on the hallway floor with a satisfying thud. The entire confrontation lasted less than 10 seconds. Marcus stood in the center of the hallway, breathing steadily, while Tyler gasped for air on his knees and his 2 friends groaned from their positions on the floor. The dozen students who had witnessed the encounter stood in stunned silence. "Stay down," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "All of you, stay down and listen." Tyler looked up with a mixture of pain, shock, and fury. You can't." "I can," Marcus interrupted, his calm demeanor never wavering. "And I just did. Now you're going to listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once." He looked around the hallway, making eye contact with each witness. The harassment stops now. The name-calling, the pushing, the destruction of property, all of it stops, not just against me, but against everyone. Tyler struggled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and rage. "You think this is over? You think—" Marcus's hand shot out again, this time grabbing Tyler's shirt and pulling him close. The football player, who had seemed so imposing just minutes before, suddenly looked small and afraid. "It's over when I say it's over," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow more terrifying than any shout. "You want to know what happens if you don't listen? You want to see what else I can do?" Tyler's eyes widened as he realized that the quiet boy he had been tormenting for weeks was capable of things he had never imagined. The controlled violence he had just witnessed was clearly just a fraction of what Marcus could unleash if pushed. I understand," Tyler stammered. "Good." Marcus released his grip and stepped back. "Because if I have to have this conversation again, it won't be in a hallway with witnesses. It will be somewhere private, where I can really explain myself. Do we understand each other?" Tyler nodded quickly, all his earlier bravado completely gone. Marcus turned to Jake and Derek, who were still picking themselves up off the floor. "Do we all understand each other?" They nodded without hesitation. "Excellent." Marcus walked over to where David was still pressed against the wall, eyes wide with amazement. "You okay?" David nodded mutely. "Good. Pick up your books. From now on, if anyone gives you trouble, you tell them to talk to me first." As Marcus walked away to retrieve his backpack, he could hear the whispered conversations starting up behind him. But the tone was different now. Instead of mockery and cruelty, there was respect. And more importantly, there was fear. Not of him, but of what would happen to anyone who decided to restart the cycle of bullying. The news of Tyler's humiliation spread through Roosevelt High even faster than the original cafeteria incident. By the next morning, everyone knew that the quiet boy in the red hat had single-handedly defeated the school's most notorious bullies. But Marcus had been careful to control the narrative. He made sure that people understood he hadn't been looking for a fight. He had been defending someone else. The distinction was important to him and to the message he wanted to send. Tyler and his crew kept their distance, but Marcus could see the resentment burning in their eyes. He knew the confrontation had solved the immediate problem, but it had also created a new one. Tyler's pride had been wounded in front of the entire school, and that kind of humiliation often led to desperate attempts at revenge. Marcus was ready for that too. The change in school dynamics was immediate and noticeable. Students who had previously avoided Marcus now nodded respectfully when they passed him in the halls. David Restrepo had become something of a shadow, following Marcus around and clearly viewing him as a personal hero. More importantly, the general atmosphere of intimidation that Tyler had created began to dissipate. Other students who had been targets of harassment found their courage, knowing that someone was willing to stand up to the bullies. Sarah Chen approached Marcus during lunch on Thursday, sitting down across from him without invitation. "That was pretty impressive," she said simply. Marcus looked up from his sandwich. "What was?" "Don't play dumb, everyone knows what you did. The question is, where did you learn to fight like that?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "My uncle owns a dojo. He's been training me since I was 12. "And you never thought to mention this before, even when Tyler was making your life miserable?" "Fighting was never the goal," Marcus replied. "It was always the last resort." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Smart. But what happens now?" "Tyler's not the type to let this go." "I know." Marcus met her eyes. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." What came next arrived sooner than expected. Marcus was walking to his car after school when he noticed Tyler's pickup truck blocking the exit from the student parking lot. Tyler was standing beside it with 6 other students. Clearly not members of his usual crew, but larger, older kids who Marcus didn't recognize. He brought reinforcements. Marcus approached calmly, his keys in one hand and his phone in the other. He had already sent a quick text to his uncle just in case. "Tyler," he said conversationally, "nice truck. You planning to move it anytime soon?" "That depends," Tyler replied, his confidence restored by the presence of his hired muscle. "I think you and I have some unfinished business." Marcus looked at the assembled group with mild interest. 6 against 1. That seems about right for your level of courage. One of the older kids, a senior Marcus recognized from the wrestling team, stepped forward aggressively. "You got a smart mouth for someone who's about to get his ass kicked." "Do I?" Marcus replied mildly. "Interesting perspective." Tyler grinned maliciously. "See, here's the thing, Red Hat. You caught me off guard the other day. That won't happen again. This time, I'm ready for you." "Are you?" Marcus set down his backpack and rolled his shoulders. loosening the muscles. "Because I have to tell you, Tyler, I don't think you understand what ready means." "We'll see about that." Tyler gestured to his friends, and they began to spread out, clearly intending to surround Marcus. It was a smart tactic against most opponents. Create multiple angles of attack, overwhelm with numbers, prevent escape. Unfortunately for them, Marcus wasn't most opponents. As the first wrestler lunged forward, Marcus stepped into the attack, rather than away from it, using the larger boy's momentum against him. A quick elbow to the ribs followed by a knee to the solar plexus dropped the wrestler before he knew what had happened. The second attacker came from the left, throwing a wild haymaker that Marcus ducked under easily. A swift uppercut to the jaw sent him sprawling across the hood of a nearby car. Tyler and the remaining four rushed him simultaneously, thinking that numbers would give them the advantage. Instead, it just created confusion and chaos that Marcus exploited ruthlessly. His uncle had trained him well in multiple opponent scenarios. The key was constant movement, never allowing them to coordinate their attacks, and using their numbers against them by positioning them so they got in each other's way. A spinning kick caught one boy in the chest, sending him stumbling backward into Tyler. A quick combination of punches dropped another to his knees. A perfectly executed throw sent the fifth attacker crashing into the side of Tyler's truck with enough force to dent the metal. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Marcus stood in the center of the parking lot, barely breathing hard, while 6 teenagers groaned and struggled to get back to their feet around him. Tyler was on his back, staring up at the sky with the dazed expression of someone who had just had his worldview completely shattered. "Anyone else want to discuss our unfinished business?" Marcus asked conversationally. Nobody responded. Good. Marcus picked up his backpack and walked to his car. "Tyler, you might want to get that dent in your truck fixed. It doesn't look very good." As he drove away, Marcus could see the defeated group in his rearview mirror, still trying to process what had just happened. The parking lot incident became legendary at Roosevelt High. Within hours, everyone knew that Marcus had single-handedly defeated 6 attackers, including members of the wrestling team. The story grew in the telling, with some versions claiming he had fought off 10 or even 12 opponents. Marcus didn't bother correcting the exaggerations. He understood that sometimes reputation was more powerful than reality, and a larger-than-life legend would prevent future challenges better than the truth. Tyler disappeared from school for the rest of the week, claiming to be sick. When he returned the following Monday, he was a changed person. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous awareness of his surroundings. He avoided eye contact with Marcus and went out of his way to stay on the opposite side of any room they shared. Jake and Derek had also undergone transformations. They no longer traveled as a pack, and they had stopped their casual harassment of other students entirely. The school's social hierarchy had been completely rearranged in the span of a single week. Principal Hendricks called Marcus to his office on Tuesday morning. "Mr. Vega," the principal said, gesturing for Marcus to take a seat, "I think we need to have a conversation." Marcus sat down calmly. "About what, sir?" "About the rumors that have been circulating, about certain incidents in the parking lot and the hallways." "I'm not sure what you mean." Principal Hendricks sighed. "Marcus, I've been doing this for 25 years. I know when something significant has happened in my school, even if I don't have all the details." Marcus waited patiently. "The thing is," the principal continued, "I've also noticed that the number of bullying incidents reported to my office has dropped to 0 over the past week. Students who were previously afraid to walk the halls alone are now confident and relaxed. The overall atmosphere of the school has improved dramatically." "That's good to hear, sir." "Yes, it is." Principal Hendricks leaned back in his chair. "So I'm going to ask you directly, Marcus. Did you have anything to do with this positive change?" Marcus considered his answer. "I believe in standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Sir, if that's contributed to a better environment for everyone, then I'm glad." Principal Hendricks nodded slowly. "I see. And how exactly did you learn to stand up for people so effectively?" "My uncle owns a martial arts school, sir. He's taught me that with great power comes great responsibility." "Wise man, your uncle." The principal was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, I want you to understand something. I can't officially condone violence as a solution to problems, but I can appreciate results. The question is, what happens now?" "Now, people can go to school without being afraid," Marcus replied simply. "That's all I ever wanted." "And if someone new decides to test your reputation?" Marcus met the principal's eyes with the same calm intensity he had shown Tyler. "Then they'll learn the same lesson everyone else has learned, sir. Some fights are worth having." Principal Hendricks smiled slightly. "I thought you might say, Just try to keep the lessons educational rather than traumatic, if you know what I mean. I understand, sir. The meeting ended with an unspoken agreement. The principal would continue to look the other way as long as Marcus continued to use his abilities responsibly, and Marcus would ensure that Roosevelt High remained a place where students could learn without fear. Over the following weeks, Marcus's reputation continued to grow. Students began approaching him with problems, not just bullying but various conflicts and disputes that needed resolution. He found himself becoming an unofficial mediator, using his presence and reputation to solve problems before they escalated to violence. David Restrepo remained his most devoted follower, but others joined the informal circle of students who looked to Marcus for protection and guidance. Sarah Chen became a close friend and advisor, helping him navigate the social complexities of his new role. "You realize you've basically become the sheriff of Roosevelt High," she told him one afternoon as they walked to class together. "That wasn't the plan," Marcus admitted. "Plans change. The question is, are you okay with it?" Marcus thought about the question seriously. A month ago, he had been just another invisible student, trying to get through each day without attracting attention. Now he was the center of attention wherever he went, and that attention came with both respect and responsibility. "I think I am," he said finally. "If I can make this place better for everyone, then maybe that's what I'm supposed to do." "Just don't let it go to your head," Sarah warned. "Power corrupts and all that." "My uncle taught me that a long time ago," Marcus replied. "The strongest person in the room is often the one who chooses not to use their strength." 3 months. After the parking lot incident, Marcus was walking through the halls of Roosevelt High when he noticed a commotion near the gym. A group of students had gathered around something, and he could hear raised voices. As he approached, the crowd parted. Automatically, students stepping aside to let him through. In the center of the circle, he found Tyler Bronson facing off against a new student, a sophomore named Alex, who had transferred in just 2 weeks earlier. Tyler had his fist raised threateningly, while Alex stood his ground with obvious fear, but impressive courage. "Problem here?" Marcus asked mildly. Tyler spun around, and for a moment his old defiance flashed in his eyes. Then reality reasserted itself and his shoulders slumped. "No problem," Tyler muttered, lowering his fist. "Good." Marcus looked at Alex. "You okay?" Alex nodded, clearly amazed that the legendary Marcus Vega had intervened on his behalf. "Tyler," Marcus said, turning back to the former bully, "walk with me." They moved away from the crowd, and Marcus guided Tyler to a quiet corner of the hallway. "I thought we had an understanding," Marcus said quietly. "We do," Tyler replied quickly. I didn't. You were about to hit that, kid." Tyler's face flushed. "He was talking trash about my girlfriend. I wasn't going to let him get away with that." Marcus studied Tyler's face. "What did he say exactly?" "He said she was too good for me, that I didn't deserve her." "And your response was to threaten violence?" Tyler looked down at his feet. "Maybe he was right. Maybe I don't deserve her. Maybe I don't deserve anything good." There was something in Tyler's voice that made Marcus pause. Over the past few months, he had watched the former bully struggle with his new place in the school's social hierarchy. Tyler had lost his crew, his reputation, and his sense of identity. Without the ability to intimidate others, he seemed genuinely lost. "Tyler," Marcus said, his voice taking on a different tone. "Look at me." Tyler raised his eyes reluctantly. "You want to know what you deserve? You deserve the chance to become a better person. But that choice is up to you, not some transfer student with an opinion." "Easy for you to say," Tyler replied bitterly. "You're the hero of this place. Everyone respects you. They respect me because I chose to use my strength to protect people instead of hurting them," Marcus said firmly. "You could make the same choice. I'm not strong like you." Strength isn't just about fighting, Tyler. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. It's about admitting when you're wrong and trying to do better. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know how to do that." "Start small," Marcus suggested. "Apologize to Alex, apologize to David Restrepo, apologize to everyone you hurt when you thought being tough meant being cruel. And then what? Then you figure out who you want to be when you're not trying to prove how tough you are." Tyler nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." As Marcus watched Tyler walk back toward the gym, he felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Maybe redemption was possible for everyone, even former bullies who had lost their way. 6 months after the first cafeteria incident, Marcus stood in the same spot where Tyler had humiliated him, looking around at a completely transformed environment. Students of all backgrounds sat together, talking and laughing without fear. The invisible barriers that had once divided the school into hostile territories had largely disappeared. David Restrepo was sitting with a group of friends, his confidence grown dramatically since that day in the hallway. Sarah Chen was tutoring a struggling football player who had once been part of Tyler's crew. Even Tyler himself was visible in the corner, eating lunch alone but no longer radiating the angry energy that had once made him so dangerous. Marcus's red MAGA hat, carefully repaired and cleaned, sat proudly on his head, no longer a target for harassment but simply another expression of personal belief in a school that had learned to tolerate diverse viewpoints. "Mr. Vega," a voice said behind him. Marcus turned to see Principal Hendricks approaching with a slight smile. "Sir, I wanted to thank you," the principal said. "Our incident reports are down 90% from last year. Student satisfaction surveys are at an all-time high, and college recruiters have started commenting on the positive atmosphere when they visit. I'm glad to hear that, sir. The question is, what are your plans for next year? Have you given any thought to college?" Marcus nodded. "My uncle thinks I should consider studying education, maybe become a teacher." "A teacher?" Principal Hendricks looked intrigued. "That's an interesting choice for someone with your talents." "My uncle says the best way to prevent fights is to teach people how to resolve conflicts peacefully," Marcus explained. "But he also says that sometimes people only listen when they know you're capable of more than words." "Wise man, your uncle," the principal repeated his earlier assessment. "I think you'd make an excellent teacher, Marcus, the kind who really makes a difference." As Principal Hendricks walked away, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. 6 months ago, he had been just another target, trying to survive each day without drawing attention. Now he was a leader, a protector, and an example of how standing up for yourself and others could transform an entire community. The red hat on his head represented more than political beliefs. It represented the courage to be yourself in a world that often punished individuality. It represented the willingness to stand alone when necessary, and the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy. Most importantly, it represented the lesson his uncle had taught him from the beginning. True strength wasn't about dominating others, but about using your power to create a world where everyone could be safe, respected, and free to be themselves. As the lunch period ended and students began filing out to their afternoon classes, Marcus picked up his backpack and prepared to join them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a positive difference, and new chances to prove that sometimes the quiet ones were the most dangerous of all, dangerous to hatred, dangerous to fear, and dangerous to anyone who thought they could build themselves up by tearing others down. The bullies had learned their lesson. Now it was time for everyone else to learn from their example.